Welcome to Perspique, where curiosity meets perspective. I'm your host Jaisakthi, and today we're incredibly lucky to have with us three practitioners who are architecting choice and influence behavior at scale, though in very different arenas. Can I welcome Mr. Utkarsh Singh, Bhushan Kumar, and Mr. Monish Khanderia? Mr. Utkarsh Singh serves as the context architect and strategist as 1001 Stories, and he is on the front lines of applying behavioral science to design solutions for complex social and developmental challenges, focusing on real world impact. Mr. Bhushan Kumar, a principal behavior architect specializing in behavioral science at Fractal Analytics, leverages the same core principles of human decision making, but within the world of AI, analytics, etc., to solve large scale business and consumer problems for corporate clients. Mr. Monish Khanderia is a senior behavioral scientist and strategy advisor. With experience in behavioral design, choice architecture, and product strategy, he has helped improve financial well being and for decision making across diverse populations. Thank you so much for joining us today,
Thank you for
sir.
having us.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, as we start off, let's talk about the big picture. So, behavioral economics, as we all know, has moved from a very academic, rigorous academic subject to something that can become corely an operational tool, right? So, from your specific vantage points, what is a very important contribution that behavioral economics has made to how we solve problems, whether in business or society? We can start with Utkarsh, sir.
Yeah. I think one of the most important things that you need to understand when it comes to understand the impact of behavioral economics per se would be the fact that it gave us a huge statement. Humans may not always operate rationally. I mean, when you think about it, some time back we were discussing, okay, humans are rational actors. What does a rational actor mean? It means people optimizing outcomes only for themselves. But when we know, and then later on came games theory, wherein you realized, okay, you don't only take into account the actions of an individual. There are other players in the game whose actions you have to take into account to form your own strategy. But again, the assumption was every player in that game would be trying to optimize the outcome for themselves. As the game evolved, as the worldviews evolved, as the problems that were encountered became more and more complex, as and wherein the lens was getting applied, you realize, maybe not. From a purely economic point of view, buying a house may not be the best choice. You you end up paying EMIs for the rest of your life, or good for a good working portion of your life. It's a strong emotional choice. But does it not? I'm just finishing it up.
Yeah.
Does that not mean it's a wrong? It's a wrong choice? Does that mean it's a wrong choice? It's not, right? It's still uh, somehow in some ways optimizing for survival, and I think that was one of the biggest contributions that the field has had.
It's very
Yeah.
interesting. Bhushan,
Yeah.
sir?
For me, there's a little philosophical take. Behavioral economics has actually taken, the world in a way closer to the truth, right? So it's actually been a vehicle to go closer to the truth. How? That's because economics would often focus on, as Utkarsh said, the ideal state, right? The utopia. That's not what reality is, right? The reality is a lot more messy. So what behavioral economics has, sort of uncovered that the truth is this way, right? And if you're going to design strategy, if you're going to design policies, it should be a lot closer to that reality, right? So for me, behavioral economics is really a vehicle that has brought us
Yeah.
closer to the truth.
I think something very similar to what Bhushan said. I feel it's sort of broken that default way of thinking. Essentially, where it came up is to challenge that assumption of rationality, right? And I think that was what we did was essentially ask the question of like, is the assumption true? And I think that's what behavioral economics sort of has carried on. I feel it's questioned, it sort of brought in that skeptical mind front and center. I feel a lot of these disciplines, they did run on just models of rationality, a lot of assumptions, a lot of structural thinking, mechanistic thinking. And I think behavioral economics sort of is breaking that things and bringing things like a bit of a systems frame, also relational paradigms. I think these things are not are borrowed from a lot of other fields, but I think synthesizing them into really bite-sized, practical ways to apply them is what I think what behavioral economics has done.
Yeah, it's
Done
very
well.
interesting. Yeah. So, zooming in from these perspectives, for all of you, the starting point is clearly behavioral economics, right? So,
No, it's
in
not for me.
okay, huh.
Yeah, yeah.
So, what would be the starting point?
For me, I per se am not a behavioral economist. My identity per se wouldn't also be a behavioral scientist. What I am is a context architect.
Okay.
And context architecture is something that we realize that as much as there's a science to understanding behavior, the behavior is being influenced by the context within which it emerges. So my starting point is whenever I'm presented with the problem is trying to understand the context within which the behavior I'm trying to look at, the behavior I'm trying to change, or the problem I'm trying to understand exists. Without that understanding, I would be very far off from the people who are actually experiencing that, the pressures within which they are operating, and any solution coming out of being that distant from their reality would be a solution in limbo, which
Yes.
just simply doesn't work. So
Yes.
that usually is my starting point.
Yes. So this would lead to a behavioral science point of view, right?
There are it's a lens. Let me put it that way. Behavioral economics, behavioral science is a lens. So one of the massive principles in behavioral economics is loss aversion per se. Yeah, that people are aversive to loss. Done. Duh. Yes. Okay. What is the meaning of loss in the context within which those people exist, right? For a lot of people, all right. So men and women, right? Oh, sorry, men and women, right? You'd see. There's a Monish, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's a very common problem that was seen for quite some time. I'm not sure how it looks right now, but that women do not invest in stock markets as much as men do, and on a very primal level, the way household dynamics evolved in, let's say, India was men would be the people who would, take the risk, think about progress, think about, how do I do more of something. Whereas women, at least the roles they traditionally would fall into, would almost preordain them to safeguard what is there. I mean, where does picking come from?
Yeah.
Like give a man a mango, he'd eat it right there. Give a woman a mango, they might make pickle out of it because they have to think about the family in the long run. Not to say that men do not. The meaning of risk for both of these people within the same family, within the same frame, is very different. And when you're trying to study loss aversion, then without operationally defining what is loss for both of them within that context, would lead you to having very opposite, very different solutions and understanding of what's going on.
Right. So essentially, what you're trying to say is without understanding the context behind a behavioral issue,
Yeah.
we won't be able to solve it to its full extent. Right?
Correct.
So when it comes to solving these issues, what is a very common nudge that you have come across? What is a problem that you usually solve for that in your specific arenas?
I think, in my experience, anything that is closest to the moment of choice survives. Essentially, what that means is, things like a good example in a financial decision-making context is sort of just-in-time reminders. Also defaults. Again, I want to caveat this by saying that it's not like you can just copy paste a default or a just-in-time reminder. I mean, going back to Utkarsh, behavioral science doesn't exclude context. Context is always part of behavioral science. It's not that it's not included in it.
I'd say
So
Srajo.
everything is is context specific, and so I think but these things have traveled quite well. But I think one of the probably the most important things I feel has traveled quite well is experimentation. And I think, in organizations especially, it doesn't just build evidence, but I feel, and this is I've had this experience quite a lot, is it gives a lot of credibility to the organization, across the organization, and also across teams and people who's working in teams. So I think that's something that I would sort of really get behind. The other bits are sort of behavioral principles. They can work, not work, but this is something I'll probably fall back on most of the times.
All right.
Yeah.
So,
So, I mean, could you just repeat the question, because I think you're speaking a lot of things.
right. So I just wanted to know what is a very common nudge or a behavioral principle or even a lead that you find yourself working a lot for or designing a lot for?
Yeah, I think two key areas that I think comes back repetitively. I think decision-making context within that context, there are two pillars that I look at: is risk and reward. I think how people perceive, is this decision going to be risky? What are the consequences, etc. And there's a quiet calibration going on, mathematical, not mathematical. Your mind makes that in split second. Along with that is also the reward, right? And reward can be both emotional and economic. Right? Often we think about an economic incentive, and that's where the behavioral economics breaks it and says there are many emotional rewards as well, right? Plus or minus. So I think those are two areas that we keep coming back to. Then take the context of financial, sort of investment space, healthcare space, right? Risk and reward is a big thing. Take the example in FMCG or consumer purchase. You think about discounts, but then you're also thinking about your social image, right? When assuming you're buying chocolates for your friends, for instance, right? All of that going on constantly. So those are sort of two concepts that I come back to. And in reward, there is something called variable reward, which it's sort of the space of having a surprise element in reward, which we've seen works very well in many cases.
Okay.
So yeah, that's a space. Yeah.
So, as we get into the diagnosis side of things, does every project that you work on or every question that you solve, does it require behavioral approach? Is it sometimes something that requires a nudge? Is it sometimes something that is simply a logistical issue or an awareness issue? And in that case, how do you diagnose it as these two things, or do they go together? So I just want more clarity on
I think the
this.
first question is an awareness issue not a behavioral issue?
Of course, yeah.
And awareness in itself does not mean change in behavior. Awareness is just a piece of information that a person knows of. You have to design for how awareness is going to work out in the reality. Simple example, yeah. Poonam Pandey, some time back, there was this, I think it was strategized by some media house, and it was around HPV vaccines. And there was this news going around, like basically an Instagram post suddenly came up that Poonam Pandey is dead.
Yeah.
And sure, it made quite a bit of rounds. Everyone became aware of the fact that, okay, there's a vaccine for HPV. Think about it. When we look at people who are, let's say, in tier 2, tier 3 cities, what's the first thing that comes to their mind when I use the word Poonam Pandey? Yeah, what's the first series of images that comes to their mind when they mention Poonam Pandey? Sure, it may have created awareness about HPV, but it's a data point.
Okay.
But if the association is that, and as you might be knowing, that it's most effective, the vaccine most effective when taken between the ages of 9 to 13, very young.
Yeah.
Which father would actually accept the fact that their daughter would be sexually active at some point?
Yes.
The method which you use to create awareness can also have a massive impact in terms of how that translates as behavior.
Yes.
So logistics, awareness, these are all words. These are all words which can be used when you're influencing behavior. But the focus should be if it's going to work or not when it comes to actually influencing behavior.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. Do you guys have any?
Yeah, I feel for me, it's like the hardest judgment call because especially being in behavioral science, you can argue most of the times that, hey, you can apply this everywhere. So it is a really mind-churning judgment call. But I think I come back to three questions. One is actually close to what Utkarsh was saying, which is there a knowledge gap? So are people aware about something or not? And I think if that's the case, then usually the way I'd probably approach it is that maybe an awareness campaign or like something very light it will suffice, not need to like bring a behavioral lens. The second bit is probably if is there a structural or a systemic gap, right? So for example, are people in financial setting, are people in hardships? I mean, no nudge is going to solve that. And you can't erase debt with reminders or repayment choices. So then behavioral science alone won't fix it. You need to bring in like product strategy, a lot of different domains. And then I think last is the behavior, like if there is a behavior involved. So things like misestimation is a huge thing in financial decision making. Procrastination, like present bias is like probably really huge in financial decision making. So if that's the case, then yeah, I would be confident enough to say that we need like a behavioral lens because there's a lot of evidence, but also a lot of opportunity to like for behavioral science to like create impact. So I think it comes down to those three questions for me.
Okay. So do you have?
Yeah. So I think it really depends on the problem, right? So it's a spectrum of simple problem to
Yes.
complex. Simple, it's easy. It's either a resource problem or a behavioral problem. Complex is where, all combine, right? So I think, sort of three questions, I think taking that format is, are all problems behavioral? No, right? Is a behavioral lens required everywhere? Maybe. But is a behavioral science or a person with a behavioral background required in every problem solving? Ideally, yes, right? Because then I think so. You think about these three that yes, you need their presence, and then you may or may not take that lens, and then eventually may not
Yes.
solve it that way because it's a problem.
Okay.
So as logistically or infrastructurally, if things are not aligned, yeah. So you could you really make a great behavioral diagnostics, but of no use. So.
Yes. As we talk about influencing people's behaviors, I have something of an ethical question right now. So, you guys clearly have the power to influence how people function, how people behave, right? And with great power comes great responsibility. So, how would you navigate the ethical tightrope that comes with behavioral economics? Because you can nudge people, like there can be positive nudges, but it can also go into certain dark patterns, right? So, how do you guys who work in this field really navigate this sort of line where it's very easy to fall there, and how do you stay on the right side of things?
Yeah, I think Utkarsh is the biggest influencer of all. I think he should answer
I was
that.
very keen to answer the question.
Yeah, the influencer speaks.
Okay, so the question should, it's actually a ontological question in nature, wherein we're trying to understand what does ethic itself mean.
Yeah.
Yeah, morals are contextual in nature. I mean, leaving a tip in, let's say, America is considered leaving food on your plate in a place like Russia is considered really bad. But leaving food on plate in Brazil, where they're far more ecologically situated culturally, is considered good. It's food for the ants. Now, if morals are contextual, if the definitions of right and wrong are contextual,
Yes.
it is a tightrope. It is a very thin rope.
Yeah.
Thus, the question again becomes, ethically speaking, what do the ethics of the people that I'm trying to work with dictate
Yeah.
what I should engage with or not? If there's a set of people who do want, let's say, 10-minute delivery to be solved, in a place like Bangalore where people are troubled with schedules, time, traffic, makes perfect sense. In a tier 3 city, let's say, where the shopkeepers are already struggling, and the people also do not have the need for a service like that, trying to enforce it on them, I won't say would be wrong, because you're not forcing it in the first place, because the only way it is actually going to work is when they need it. So the best that you can do is, so when is a service like that needed? Medical emergencies, maybe. And so you solve for that.
Okay.
At the end of the day, you need to recognize if something is ethically wrong. People are not stupid. People will recognize, and you will face scrutiny for that. It's not a matter of if it's ethically right or not. It's a matter of what are you willing to put up with.
Okay. Anything to add?
Yeah. So I believe I think ethics really, on a practical, tactical sense, is really who has the money and the power. They decide ethics, really, right? So that's one. But as practitioners of behavioral science, I feel like we have that sort of a gatekeeping responsibility. And so in any engagement with clients, etc., one of the first things we ask is what's in it for the end consumer, right? Or the one we are influencing.
Absolutely.
And if they are benefiting, that's ethics, right? If they are not, then hey, it's only one party that's benefiting, right? Because when you're talking about change, it's a two-way street in a way, right? You're changing for your own change, your own, sort of. So, but yes, very honestly, I think ethics really boils down to, who's at the position of deciding, right? So I think what Utkarsh was saying, that, hey, there are these things, pharma is better, maybe food in tier 3. again, he comes from that position of power to talk
No.
about that. For someone else, it might be
Correct.
Yeah.
different.
It
right?
must
So-
be informed by the people that
Yes.
at the end of
Exactly.
the day is. I just add this bit though.
Yeah.
Because it's coming from experience, and I think that should help understand this question better, because talking in abstract terms really doesn't help. We were working on this project wherein we got a proposal around trying to create a nicotine replacement therapy product. Nicotine is addictive, regardless of whatever form you're going to ingest it in. Question is, should you do that or should you not do that? What do we do? I mean, you can just say, I will not dabble in anything around that. But then, again, there's a business side of it. As we went and consulted a bunch of doctors. We talked to them. We asked, does creating something like this really help? Does it help smokers in the first place? And the question and the answer was essentially, it helps them reduce at least the smoke bit of it. I mean, they're objectively ingesting less tar. Yes, nicotine in itself has negative aspects. It does vasoconstriction, the other stuff, but that can be weaned off on a larger period. But the degree of damage that the tar itself from the smoke is doing is definitely getting mitigated. So these are the nuances that you need to consider when you're thinking in terms of ethics. So for a good culture, does creating something like that help? Definitely, because in the first place, you're reducing the chances of them getting throat cancer, mouth cancer. Is nicotine objectively bad? Yes. Does reducing the probability of them getting cancer ethically right? Yes. So there are conflicting ethics.
You pick lesser of the two evils.
Yeah. Anything to add?
Yeah, I think, being in a bank, ethics is usually brought in a lot because banks are making profits left, right, and center. And in my experience, well, this is by chance that we are part of a team which the purpose is purely like customer outcomes, so which is financial well-being outcomes. So when we go and address a problem, we always sort of ask what is the customer outcome, and of course the science part is that if we can measure it, and it's not just saying that we are improving customer outcomes. But yeah, the bank also wants to move the needle on business outcomes. But I think it is a big, again, judgment call on our part to be able to balance both. And I think one bit that I add is that you need other people in the room. I don't think behavioral scientists have maybe this power, as you say, but they shouldn't be left alone. Right? I think to be skeptical of your own mind as well, just as you are with other people who are influencing, is equally important.
Yes.
So
That's
you
why you
need other
consult
people.
experts, right? That's why you consult the experts of the field. So
Yeah.
if it's a health thing, consult a damn doctor.
Yes.
Ask them, is this the right thing to do or not?
Okay.
And then you collect enough number of opinions, and then you reach a consensus. And that's how it works. Yep.
Yeah.
So for this next question, I'm a math major. So I'm very interested in how behavioral science quantifies its impacts, right? So is working with it quantifiable? For example, how do you tie the impacts of working with the business? How do you tie it with the business's metrics? What are the units that you go by? And if you're working with a social impact, this thing, how do you measure something that is inherently immeasurable, at least for the outside perspective who are not behavioral scientists? How do you measure something that people perceive to be measurable as behavior, right? So how does that go about?
Bhushan, you want to answer that?
Yeah, I can take that first. I think there are two parts to this question I want to answer, right? One is, I think the smallest bit of behavior, let's say decisions, right, are measurable, because any decision you take, there is a particular data point that's triggered, right? So imagine you're using a phone, you click, you don't click, that's really a decision that's taken. You purchase a product, that's a decision. You're on a Fitbit and you track your steps, that's data point. So you are able to track decisions, so some part of that. The second part to this is also, I think often we think of data as quantitative, right? There's this sort of a very mono outlook of, data means numbers and numbers means, evidence, right? But that's not true, because, there are many aspects of it which explain, and data, if you think about it, data is really explaining something, right? Or telling you about it. So if that be the definition, then data can be anything beyond numbers, right? And so to that extent, if data has only given me a correlational output, right, and that means I need to find the causality elsewhere, and that means I need to expand the portion of data, right? And to that extent, then the qualitative elements can come in. The elements of emotions, for instance, right, may not necessarily be quantified, because you can't say, two people are happy, who's happier, right? But the very fact that happiness is able to link or explain some sort of a factor,
Okay.
that is a good starting point. And then, of course, you build on that, right? And I think today, the whole biopsychology or the neuroscience bit is focused on measuring and building that. But that, again, puts numbers central, which I personally don't feel
Okay.
is the right approach.
Yeah, in my experience, to give you like a tangible example, in financial decision making, what we measure is financial well-being.
Yes.
And this is out there, it's public information. You can even go look it up. It is based on a scale developed by Melbourne Institute. So what it does, it essentially measures both the objective outcome and the subjective, which I think is important based on what Bhushan is saying, not just about the numbers objectively, but also measuring subjective outcomes. And it's a really good scale, and it's continuously being sort of broken, again redeveloped based on how the tests have been done before. So I think that's the answer, is that definitely, like, there's a lot of metrics that you can develop to even measure a lot of subjective outcomes. But I think the emphasis should be just before is to do it. Like, I think a lot of the science is in like half of behavioral science or more, right? So I think creating those impact metrics is part of like an experimental design process. And I think, yeah, every very good behavioral scientist will, have a really good structured experimental design with an hypothesis and impact metrics, both like primary and secondary. And yeah, there's all sorts of examples as well, even in the most subjective contexts, that you can create a metric and measure.
Okay. So, before my last question, once again, I want to thank you guys for sitting for this interview. Thank you so much for teaching us so much about context, about nuance, about how behavioral science is at its core. So, my last question is, I just want to look at the future of the field, especially in times where we are battling almost in a way with tools like AI, which do they have the control or do they have the power to change how we operate with behavioral economics, and how will behavioral economics as a field change in the future?
Okay. I'm sure other members of my team, at least at my workplace, would approach this question very differently, because things we're good at, the things we naturally find ourselves gravitating towards are different, and all of that comes together for all of us to solve a problem. But if it were me, and if you could ask me where's this headed together, I feel a lot of different fields, and sometime back in the previous panel, Bhushan was talking about that. Marketing, sales, knowledge, even the best of the books, if you think about it, in behavioral science have come from folks who are not from the field, right? Even, psychology itself, right? Freud, Jung, they were all doctors first, and then they came up with the theories. I feel at some point it would be more of an ontological and epistemological revolution is yet to happen. We do not have a science to understand people yet. I have a very strong stance on that. And I don't believe we have a science which is borrowed from material physical sciences, which talks in terms of p-values and over regression. But then there are other fields who deal more with complexity. Case in point, complex systems studies. And a lot of new methodologies have been derived from that. I mean, been in use for past 10 years, like ABMs, agent-based models. I feel we're reaching a place over time where we are thinking in terms of systems. We are trying to find ways in which how to relate that back to the individual. We are thinking in terms of second order effects, which is, okay, so I designed for this. Again, that ties back to ethics also. When you're thinking about ethics, you're not just thinking about what am I trying to achieve here, but what is the second order effect after I'm done achieving that? What is the effect? And a lot of times it just happens you achieve that and then it goes back to the same place, which is feedback loops. So there's a lot of comfort with complexity in itself. That is slowly, and I find a lot of people have now started talking about that. That is going to come in. People are going to become very comfortable with understanding experience, the human experience, as an emergent factor, not something that's just determined by 2 or 3 variables, but multiple variables coming in together for an experience to emerge. And that's emergence, and it would become an emergence first as a field, and not as something that's just trying to reduce people into variables.
Yes.
Yeah.
For me, I think, I think the future is, how do I put it? I think there will be a science for human behavior. I think, in fact, I recently read a paper which they developed a model which mimicked like all the possible like cognitive outcomes. It was I haven't like read it fully, but I think it was fascinating.
Fantastic.
I think so, and that paper like used an LLM to do that. But I am like a little bit of a skeptic as well. Like I probably mentioned 1,000 times before today. I think like the relational aspect is quite probably underutilized still. Kind of what he alluded to about the complexity theory.
Yes.
Yeah, I think there is either like an I frame, S frame, but I think something together is probably where it should head, I would say, in my opinion. But I think there is research as well coming in that direction. So I'm a little bit optimistic, but I think, yeah, that's probably where it should head. And also, personally, I think what I've been recently sort of debating is the value of like philosophy in behavioral science. So things like values are kind of a little bit different to behaviors, and there's like this value behavior gap. In behavioral science, we talk a lot about intention action gap, but there's one layer deeper is like a value behavior gap. Because a lot of times, does value influence behavior, or does behaviors like form values? And those are like really big part of human experiences. So I think that's something a little bit untapped, and I mean, this is visual thinking. I don't know if it's heading there, but at least I'd like it to. Yeah.
Bhushan, sir?
Yeah, I think again, two parts to how I think about it. One is as a researcher, I think it does two parts, right? One is it improves efficiency. I think that's done and dusted. I think the second layer is also to do with improving the quality, right, or the effectiveness of how we are doing research. Because we spoke about bounded rationality. There's only that much I know as a researcher, and maybe something more. But then AI sort of opens up that field and says, there's more beyond, right? So it both fast tracks, but also better quality, right? So that's one aspect. The other aspect that I am excited personally about is the whole human computer interaction, right? So I think the AI now reaching perhaps the next stage where we're talking about agents and agentic AI, which is the frontier, and people still don't know, it's very conceptual, is also identifying how that changes social dynamics, right? Because how that affects the behavior, of course, the behavioral principles in a way, because they are universal. It's another player in the room really, and there is that shift that's going on. So that's something I'm excited about.
Yes.
But otherwise, as a researcher, of course, it's both troubling that will it take a job, but then on the other side also, maybe we'll make a job better. So it's every day you swing between the two.
Have a take on that, because I'm aware there's a startup in UK which is YC funded. It's called Artificial Societies, and what they've been doing is again making use of ABMs and LLMs together and trying and creating a new framework in which you can test your communication. Like you can simulate different societies and test your communication, test different interventions, and how that works out. The problem with that is, as much as you can tell the change that happens and to what degree, it doesn't tell you what is the experience of that intervention put in place
Okay.
is like in the first place. Humans process their reality not in terms of data, not in terms of variables. They experience reality. It's literally in the word. It's an experience wherein everything's coming together to create an image. Now you must simulate that, but you can never tell what's the second order effect of it. Just as the again, Pune Pandey case, wherein, yes, on a social media, if you do a network mapping, oh, it blew up. But what was the outcome? Did it actually objectively increase vaccine uptake? It did not. Why? Because we did not account for the experience of that intervention.
Yes. Okay.
And that should be at the forefront of what we're
The
trying to do.
future of behavioral
Yeah.
economics. So that was all of my questions for today. Thank you so much for this, Utkarsh sir, Bhushan sir, and Monish sir. You guys have not only demystified behavioral economics, but you've also explained the why, the how, the what behind behavioral economics. Thank you so much for explaining the nuances of working in this field. We leave today with a better understanding of how to design for a better future. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
having me.
Once again, this was Jaisakthi for Perspique. Follow along for more such great insights at the intersection of human behavior and innovation. Thank you.